The Pokemon series has been part of my life for as long as I can remember. It's one of those rare franchises that feel like as if it has become interwoven into my DNA. It is a series that has been and always will be close to my heart. But lately, as the quality of the newer games has seemed to become inconsistent or just outright diminished, I've found myself drifting back towards the game that defined my childhood, Pokémon Platinum. As someone who grew up in the aughts, the fourth generation of Pokémon holds a near and dear spot in my heart as my first generation of Pokemon, as the games that made me truly fall in love with gaming, and as the catalyst for so many core memories from my childhood that I still cherish to this day. Even now, years later, I find myself coming back to this entry in the series every so often, whether it's for yet another replay or to simply take in and bathe in the atmosphere of the Sinnoh region while exploring what the game has to offer. Well, here's the thing. My love for Pokemon Platinum is not just solely based on the copious amounts of nostalgia that I hold for it. While yes, this is surely part of why I adore this game as much as I do, Pokemon Platinum is also just a really solid entry in the series. So much so that it's a contender for my favorite game of all time. I'll always have a soft spot for the games that I grew up with. I mean, we all do, and that's something we can't entirely deny. But there is something so fantastic about the overall game design and atmosphere of Pokemon Platinum that has constantly managed to draw me back into its world time and time again, whereas other entries in the series from around the same time period have failed to do so. So grab a snack and a drink, sit back and relax, because today I want to take a deep dive into Pokemon Platinum and figure out what made this game so special to myself and so many others. Why is this game held in such a high regard after over 15 years? What is so appealing about this game that manages to consistently draw people back to it after all this time? With all that said, let's take a look into what made Pokemon Platinum so special. Let me just say again that Pokemon Platinum is my childhood game. This is a game that means the world to me, and while it wasn't my first video game ever, it was the first one I was actually conscious enough for and actually got to enjoy to its fullest. I mean, I really couldn't have chosen a better game on the day in November that I went to the now defunct GameStop in the local mall. I mean, I knew I wanted a Pokemon game because I watched the Galactic Battles anime as a kid, but it was just dumb luck that they were sold out of Diamond and Pearl at that time. Honestly, it's kind of surprising I never gave up with this game. I was the type of kid who didn't finish all of her games, because I would get stuck or I couldn't figure out something and instead would play something else. But this was the first game I ever truly completed. As I've gotten older, I've managed to break that habit, but it's funny how this was the first game I ever got to the end of despite being touted as one of the hardest Pokemon games out there. Being this was the era before downloadable content was commonplace, we got third versions of Pokemon games, and that's what Pokemon Platinum is. It's the definitive version of the fourth generation of Pokemon games, Diamond and Pearl. These games were already designed to be the ultimate Pokemon titles, so they had to somehow complete the Herculean task of making a game even stronger than the two of them. But calling Pokemon Platinum a third version just feels so reductive, because it's so much more than that. It's a refinement and love letter to everything that just made the Sinnoh region so special. It takes everything from Diamond and Pearl that fans hated, such as the sluggish pacing, the limited Pokédex, and the lack of post-game content, and smooths them out, creating a polished, complete, and satisfying user experience. Pokemon Platinum doesn't just fix what was broken with the fourth generation though. It was adding depth and layers that make you just stop and say, wow. So, sure, Pokemon Platinum is a third version of the fourth generation of Pokemon at its heart, but I'd say it's so much more than that. I'd even go as far to say it's one of the two entries in the series I'd consider to be the definitive Pokemon games. But to truly understand what makes Pokemon Platinum so special, we need to delve even deeper into this game, and we need to look at what makes this game a masterpiece. To me, atmosphere is just one of those qualities that can either make or break a video game for me. It's not entirely about the visuals or the music, but instead how the game absorbs you into it. Drinking in the atmosphere in video games is something that has become almost second nature to me in recent years. It's something that the other series I hold near and dear to my heart, Trails, helped instill in me. But coming back to this game with that mindset of taking in the atmosphere has completely altered my experience with the Sinnoh region. I mean, I've always been one to take in the atmosphere when I'm playing a video game, just not as intentionally as I do nowadays, and it was completely altering of my experience. As a child, I would go to my grandparents' house after school while I waited for my parents to come home every day. I would bring my Nintendo DS on this car ride that felt like it was just going to take forever, and I would walk around the Sinnoh region trying to find areas that matched the places on our commute. I just want to say that there is something so inherently soothing about traversing through Eterna Forest while driving through the woods and fields of New Jersey. It's surreal. When it comes to atmosphere, though, very few games handle it as well as Pokémon Platinum does. This isn't just your average Pokémon game, it goes far beyond that. It's an amazing experience, one that manages to sink its teeth into you and drag you along for the ride. The world of Sinnoh feels like more than just a backdrop for your journey, it's a character in its own right. From the moment you leave your home in Twinleaf Town, you're thrown into this sprawling world with its own mysteries for you to go out and explore. It's a world that combines mythology with technology, the type of world where serene lakes sit below in the shadows of towering mountaintops, and where every corner of the world has its own story to tell you. The atmosphere isn't just built through the big things either. There are little details riddled throughout Pokémon Platinum that just build up the world ever so slightly. The way the snow crunches under your feet as you slowly trek through Route 217, while this song plays throughout the route. It makes you feel as if you're walking through the snowy field just having a fun time. The eeriness of the old chateau, where ghostly whispers hint at a tragic past, creating this haunting sensation that makes you feel the stakes of the area before you go and catch Rotom. There's something about this area that still gives me the creeps to this day, even though now I'm almost in my mid-20s. It's honestly kinda shocking. One of the most striking aspects of Platinum's atmosphere is its sense of scale. Sinnoh is a region that feels vast, with every route and town connected in a way that makes the world feel cohesive and interconnected. The journey all the way from Twinleaf Town to the Pokémon League isn't just a series of levels, with pathways in between. It's a grand adventure that you get to go on. A trek across a land with tough challenges and brand new discoveries. And when you finally reach the end, when you finally stand atop the Pokémon League and look out over the region you've just traveled, it's hard not to feel a sense of accomplishment, especially with the Pokémon League theme playing as you stand atop that waterfall. Honestly, besides the little things, the main thing that just helps Sinnoh's atmosphere is the amazing soundtrack. It captures the tone and atmosphere of the Sinnoh region perfectly. Take Eterna Forest, for example. Exploring this mysterious area with Cheryl is easily one of the most unique atmospheres in a game yet. It's calm, but has this feeling of unknown to it. The way the audio moves from the left to the right speaker throughout the beginning of the song makes it feel as if it is echoing throughout the forest itself. It's such a unique touch that I love, and I wish more games in this era took advantage of. I'm genuinely so nostalgic for this game, and hearing Eterna Forest on replays genuinely just makes me stop and bask in the moment while I collect myself and prepare to proceed on what I consider to be the greatest Pokemon journey ever. Of course, a great world is nothing without amazing gameplay to back it up, and Pokémon Platinum manages to deliver that in spades. Everyone talks about how Pokémon Platinum is such a hefty improvement over the original Diamond and Pearl games, because the pacing of the game is increased, but most people who like that game and have played future entries have to agree. Platinum is still very slow, and don't get me wrong, I don't mean in terms of the opening hours of the game. In fact, Platinum streamlined the openings of Diamond and Pearl by making it so you get into the action so much faster, while maintaining that sense of discovery and adventure that is so iconic to the Pokemon series. But instead, I just mean battles are a slower pace. Not as bad as Diamond and Pearl were, but still the game feels like a bit of a slog at times, especially against higher HP Pokemon like Chansey and Blissey. One of the things that helps set Pokemon Platinum apart from other entries in the series is its difficulty. This isn't a game that holds your hand, but instead one that challenges you and forces you to adapt and alter your strategy if you are struggling. Take the gym leaders in Elite Four for example. Each one presents a unique challenge with teams that are well designed and require some planning to defeat. As a child, I didn't understand type matchups all too well, so going into Fantina's gym and fighting her with my team of Monferno and some low-level early route Pokemon was the first time I truly experienced a challenge in a video game. I mean, I was 7 or 8 years old at the time, and while I could understand what was going on, I don't think I fully grasped what type matchups were for a while, and eventually I got it. Still, that was a struggle. But then there are trainers like Cynthia, who is widely regarded as one of the toughest champions in the entirety of the Pokemon series. She has a team that is perfectly balanced and capable of countering almost any strategy against her, and her Garchomp, Spiritomb, and Togekiss are all nightmares to face with their incredible speed and power. But the challenge isn't just limited to battles. The game's puzzles from Galactic HQ to the Distortion World require careful thought and experimentation. Even now, I still struggle with the Distortion World and traversing it. I don't think that's something they'll ever get much better at though. The most standout feature of Pokemon Platinum's postgame is the brand new Battle Frontier, a postgame facility that offers some of the most challenging battles in the series. This isn't a place just to test your skills, but a playground for those who want to take the game even further by using its several facilities. What makes this Battle Frontier my favorite in the series is how much depth and replayability there is. With Generation 4 introducing the physical special split, Pokemon combat has evolved exponentially, and this just makes this one of the most engaging Battle Frontiers that the series has offered, with the amount of strategy, adaptability, and creativity needed to clear this challenge. Pokemon Platinum was one of the first games in the series to fully embrace online connectivity, and it's a feature I wish I would be able to talk about more in depth, but unfortunately due to Nintendo Wi-Fi connection going defunct in 2014, all I could do was research the feature and go off hazy memories from my childhood. Trading and battling have always been a highlight of the Pokemon series, but with the introduction of Wi-Fi connectivity, Platinum takes it to the next level. Features such as the Global Trade Station, otherwise known as the GTS, allowed for players to search for a specific Pokemon and trade for them with anyone across the world, making it easier than ever to complete your Pokédex. The Wi-Fi Plaza, on the other hand, offers a fun and social space for players to interact with each other through minigames to show off their Pokemon. Fortunately, I never really got to experience anything other than the GTS and battling, so I'm not really able to comment much on the Wi-Fi Plaza itself, but from all the archival footage I've seen and the friends I've talked to in the process of making this video, it genuinely seems like such a fun feature. As much as I've hyped up Pokemon Platinum for this entire video, let's quickly tackle some of the flaws of this game. What makes Pokemon Platinum special isn't that it's perfect, it's that it takes those imperfections and balances them out with so much heart, creativity, and polish in other key areas. The slow early game is offset by the rich, immersive world of Sinnoh, and even then, it isn't as slow as the original Diamond and Pearl or some of the other future entries. The uneven level curve is balanced out by a satisfying challenge of the Elite Four and Champion Cynthia. It eventually levels out by the time you reach them, but man, some of the early parts of the game can be a struggle if you don't do a bit of grinding. The HM problem is mitigated by the game's sense of adventure and discovery. This one I can't really justify as much as I hate HMs as much as nearly everyone else, but just throw them on a Bidoof and you're golden. The flaws of Pokemon Platinum, they're undeniable. But the thing is, they don't detract from the game's overall quality like other games in the series. But in fact, they manage to serve as a reminder that even the best games have imperfections, and that's okay. So now that I'm done talking about the flaws within Platinum, I want to just quickly cover how Platinum enhances the original Diamond and Pearl games. The original Generation 4 had so many flaws scattered among them, whether it was a lack of fire types, the sluggish pacing, or an over-reliance on HMs, and a lack of a proper postgame, which are all fixed in Platinum version. Well, mostly. The Pokédex in the original Diamond and Pearl were initially very lacking, especially when it came to fire types, as well as lacking the new evolutions behind the postgame for some reason, making it nearly impossible for players to get their hands on either Glaceon or Leafeon during their playthroughs. Platinum rectifies this issue by expanding the Pokédex by over 50 Pokemon, as well as giving the player everything they need to experience all of the new Pokemon introduced in the game within the main journey itself. Another improvement that isn't present in the original Diamond and Pearl is the new story content. While these games laid the initial groundwork for the Sinnoh story, Platinum takes it to the next level and expands upon the lore of the region, adding the Distortion World, which gives Giratina a whole new story, and characters such as Cyrus and members of Team Galactic becoming much more fleshed out by having more screen time. Cyrus is given so much more development because of the new screen time for him, making him a more compelling and chilling antagonist. Your rivalry with Barry feels so much more dynamic, especially given the Restore Island interactions in the postgame, and the interactions with other characters like Looker, Riley, and Karen add so much depth to the world. Also, I quickly want to reiterate on the Battle Frontier from earlier. It's a unique addition to Platinum that wasn't present in Diamond and Pearl, and it just adds so much replayability to these games. There's also some visual enhancements in Platinum version. The game takes everything just a step further with the enhanced sprite work, more vibrant colors, and improved animations. Some Pokemon had their sprites changed, such as Registeel. If you know, then you know why. Also, the Distortion world stands out in particular as a visual masterpiece with its surreal and otherworldly design. It's genuinely so cool seeing something like that in a Pokemon game. Since we're talking about Generation 4, I want to quickly just cover the remakes really quickly. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. The Sinnoh remakes are by far the most universally hated games in the Pokemon series from what I've seen online, which is a stark contrast to the love that fans hold for even the original entries. And I think this reception has a lot to do with how they removed a lot of the stuff introduced in Pokemon Platinum version, in order to maintain their mission of being faithful to the original games. In order to maintain this, they actually changed the visual style back to chibi-based, which looks clunky at best, with the way the models aren't locked to the grid like in the original Diamond and Pearl. I'm not one to bash on visuals in games. Hell, my favorite game of all time looks like this. But something about this just irks me. I had expected a game in the style of Generation 8, which is maybe why, even now, playing it just makes me feel upset at the way it came out. However, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl introduced several newer quality of life mechanics into the Sinnoh region, such as the always active EXP share and the ability to access your PC at any moment. While these changes are ultimately welcomed by newer players to the series, as someone who experienced the original Generation 4 on the DS, it's easy for me to say that this disrupts the flow and balance of the game entirely. Usually, playthroughs of the 4th generation take me anywhere between 25 to 35 hours of playtime, whereas Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl took a measly 10 hours, because I had been severely over-leveled throughout the entirety of it. This was without any grinding and just following the main storyline of the games. Prior to actually making this video, I never beat these games, because they just felt like bastardizations of the games I loved, and ultimately I still feel the same way, if not a little stronger. Some other content from the original game was also removed, such as the expanded Pokédex, the post-game content of Platinum, and the additional story content, which makes sense. Losing all this content just makes the game feel so bleak and lifeless when compared to the Platinum version of Generation 4. The remakes were released at a very weird point in my life. I had just finished up high school the summer before, and was trying to figure out what to do with my life after dropping out of college. It was actually the game I considered using to attempt to get back into content creation at the time. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get into them, and I dropped all plans I had for it at the time, so it's kind of nice to just get my thoughts out there off my chest nowadays, while talking about the game I enjoy so much. Ultimately, Platinum feels like a more cohesive and complete experience when compared to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, as the remakes managed to completely ignore additions made by Platinum version in a vain attempt to be faithful to the original games. The simplified post-game, the quality of life improvements, the visual style, and removing any additional story content just makes these games feel like such a letdown comparatively. So, why does Pokemon Platinum still endure to this day as so many people's favorite Pokemon game? Why is it still held in such a high regard after over a decade? The answer is honestly really simple. Pokemon Platinum understands what makes a Pokemon game so special. The sense of adventure, the joy of discovery, the memorable experiences you have with your Pokemon. But more than that, Pokemon Platinum isn't afraid to take risks that the other entries in the series struggle to make. This is the first Pokemon game that has a darker and more complex story, while managing to stay true to the spirit of the series. It's a game that refines the Pokemon formula perfectly while adding on new layers of depth and content on top of it. For me, Pokemon Platinum isn't just another Pokemon game. It's a reminder of why I fell in love with the series in the first place, and why I'm still playing these games after 15 years. It's a game that shaped my childhood and challenged me in all sorts of ways. As the years go by, and newer games come and go, Pokemon Platinum has remained a constant and shining example of what this series can be and why it's so special to myself and so many other people. At this point, you're probably thinking, is this dumb bitch done going on her hyperfixation-induced ramble about Pokemon Platinum yet? But don't worry, you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching up until this point about the game that I love so much, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.